The Knight is possibly the most underrated killer in Dead by Daylight, and contrary to what you may have heard, you do not have to rely on a snooze fest playstyle in order to win with him, like 3-genning or just pooping guards at loops. In fact, my favorite builds on the Knight heavily encourage chase-oriented games. So in this video, we're going to take an in-depth look at the Knight. We'll be going over the most impactful ways to use each of his guards, his best add-ons, best builds, and I'll explain how to beat really good survivors using his power, because there's no point in showcasing the skill ceiling of this killer if I'm just basing it off of beating average survivors. Now, before we get into it, I want you to be fully aware that the Knight is not fun to play against for the majority of survivors, even if you're going for 12-foot games. So if that's something that really bothers you, then you'll have a rough time playing this killer. There's also chapters for every topic of the video, so if you want to jump straight to a specific part, you could do that at any time. Alright, to start, we have to go into a bit of detail about how each guard works, because honestly the game leaves out a lot of vital information about them. The guards are summoned by default in this cycling order every single time: Carnifex, Assassin, and Jailer. But we're going to talk about the Assassin first. Now, a lot of players have come to the misinformed conclusion that the Assassin is the worst of the 3 guards, but he might actually be the best. He's the only guard that can catch up to decent survivors and hit them, which also puts them in deep wound. The trade-off is that his area of patrol is very small, so it's more difficult to start a guard hunt with him. His base hunt time is only 12 seconds. However, there's 2 S-tier add-ons that we'll talk about more in depth soon, which greatly increase the Assassin's lethality, which are Map of the Realm and Dried Horsemeat. Up next is the Carnifex, who is a close second to the Assassin in terms of utility. The Carnifex excels at breaking pallets and breakable walls. He actually breaks pallets so quickly by default that you can literally just walk through the pallet the second the animation starts. If you are ever able to predict pre-drops, you can use this guard to quickly gain distance and get free hits. The Carnifex also hunts survivors the longest by default for a full 24 seconds. However, he's slower than the Assassin to make up for it. So even though he probably won't get a hit on survivors, he can at least keep them busy for a decent amount of time. Plus, he's the best guard for zoning survivors into lose-lose situations. Lastly, we have the Jailer, who is really good at guarding positions and starting hunts. Like the Assassin, he only hunts for 12 seconds, but unlike the Assassin, he's as slow as the Carnifex, so his most beneficial uses are guarding hooked survivors, gens, and exit gates, basically acting as a scout or decoy. That said, since his detection range is 14 meters and it's so large that it makes it nearly impossible to outshift W his spawn, so with the Dried Horsemeat add-on bumping his chase time up to 16 seconds, you'll be able to zone survivors quite consistently with him as well. Speaking of add-ons, next up we're going to go over all of them, starting with his 3 S-tier add-ons. The first of which is Map of the Realm. This add-on simply increases the detection range of your guards by 4 meters, and fortunately it's a brown add-on, so you can easily stock up on an infinite supply of these because you will need them. Now, this add-on is basically required if you're going for any kind of playstyle where you're using the Knight's power to get downs. This is because the Knight's guards summon very slowly to the point where survivors can easily run out of the detection range before they actually spawn in. Add to that, the survivors are also able to see your summoning orb, so you can't catch them by surprise, and instead you must brute force the power in order to get it to work, which is what this add-on allows you to do. But honestly, it should be base kit. His second best add-on is Call to Arms, increasing the length of his patrol path by 10 meters, which is how far away you can spawn a guard from your current position, and it increases the movement speed of your spawning orb by 25%. This is the definitive add-on that raises the Knight's skill ceiling to deal with really good survivors on any map. Even with Map of the Realm, good survivors will still outrun your spawning orb, especially on larger maps. But with this add-on, you can play the Knight a lot like Spirit, allowing you to track survivors by noise and summon a guard either right on top of them or a little bit in front of them. I promise you that by using this add-on and taking the time to learn it, you'll be able to close the gap on sweaty survivors and have a much more enjoyable experience playing the Knight. His last S-tier add-on is Dried Horsemeat, which increases the length of a guard hunt by 4 seconds. Now let me tell you, 4 seconds might not seem like a whole lot, but you will notice an extreme difference in game. especially with the amount of hits your guards are getting without any help from you. Even though Call to Arms is incredibly powerful, dried horse meat does work better on small maps like the game because Knight is already much stronger on smaller maps and Call to Arms isn't nearly as necessary. Alright, now we're moving on to his decent add-ons. In the right situation, you can still get a lot of good value out of these. First up is Treated Blade, which is going to summon the Assassin Guard twice in a row every time you move through your guard rotation. This is going to allow you to get a lot more free hits without any input from yourself in a chase. For the next add-on, we have Battle Axe Head, which summons the Carnifex twice in a row. This is especially good for maps with a lot of pallets like the game, so you can make a specific build with the Carnifex and just use him to destroy pallets with a good map offering that supports it. The problem is that when you play against really good survivors, they always play around pallets and don't throw them down, so you need to take that into consideration if you want to run this add-on. Then we have one of his two iridescent add-ons, Company Banner, and this add-on does a lot of okay things. Most importantly, any window you travel through with your summoning orb gets blocked for 15 seconds, which actually is really strong. There are a lot of dead ends in DBD where the only escape is a window. Typically, these are known as God windows that only favor survivors, but with this add-on, you can actually trap survivors and use God windows against them. It is way more difficult than it sounds though. It also blocks the window that the survivors vault through for every survivor until the hunt ends, which sounds nice in practice, but doesn't actually do very much and is very niche. Lastly, this add-on will block exit gates like Blood Warden for a survivor in a guard hunt, which can be satisfying if you manage to down them. Next up is Lightweight Greaves. This add-on increases the knight's movement speed by 10% for 6 seconds after summoning the jailer. This probably should have been base kit because the jailer is lacking in utility by default, but it's still a pretty decent add-on. I wouldn't recommend making an entire build around it because it's not that good, but you will get value running this add-on without the Cold Steel Manacles add-on, which summons the jailer twice in a row. Alright, on to Grim Iron Mask. Anytime a survivor is detected by a guard, they suffer from the blindness status effect for 60 seconds. Now, blindness is somewhat of an underrated status effect right now in DBD, and this add-on honestly gives very fair value. Anytime a guard just detects a survivor, that survivor has a full minute of blindness. Plus, if you combine that with a perk like Fearmonger, it's going to delay the cooldown anytime they work on a gen. This will counter Fogwise, Windows of Opportunity, Kindred, and allow Pain Resonance to activate much more consistently. His last good add-on is Tattered Tabard, which increases patrol time for all guards by 6 seconds. Now, to be clear, this is not a good add-on for chasing survivors or downing survivors. In fact, it will actually hurt you because you won't be able to use your power for an additional 6 seconds. The thing that makes this add-on kinda disgusting is by 3-genning with it. Combine this add-on with dried horse meat and you can lock down a 3-gen until everyone in the lobby passes out. It's not my playstyle, but it's definitely a viable choice. Now we're moving on to meme add-ons. These are not good add-ons, but you can use them with certain playstyles to get a bit of value and maybe a laugh. First up is Flint and Steel. After summoning the Carnifex, any survivors within 24 meters of an already dropped pallet have their aura revealed for 5 seconds. Now, you will get a lot of information from this for sure, but it's too inconsistent. There can be a match where this add-on wins the match for you, and there can be another match where it never gives you a single piece of information. It's probably best run with things like Hex Plaything or Stealth perks to try to get the jump on oblivious survivors. Next up is Healing Poultice, which makes all survivors within 24 meters of you scream and reveal their location for 3 seconds when you summon the assassin. Now, there's no denying the fact that that's a lot of information. However, like with the previous add-on, you can do basically nothing with that information because you have sacrificed your utility add-ons for it, leaving your actual power pretty much in the gutter. Moving on to Town Watch's Torch. This add-on gives the knight 25 seconds of stealth every time the survivors escape a guard hunt without being hit 3 times, and it doesn't have to be in a row. Now, this might sound like a bad add-on, but you will actually get this to activate a few times in a match passively, and 25 seconds is nothing to really complain about. It could be longer for sure, or even last until you actually hit a survivor, but it's still better than it sounds. The biggest issue is that it's very RNG reliant, and you'll probably need something like an aura reading perk to make use of the limited stealth. Plus, the Knight is very loud, so you'll have to be quick to get an actual hit. Next up is the Knight's second iridescent add-on, Knight's Contract, which makes all survivors within 12 meters of your 4th summoned guard exposed for 8 seconds. Now the range is pretty decent on this, but the 8 seconds is way too short to actually get value in almost every situation. That said, there is one big, enormous, cheese-ass way to use this add-on effectively: face camping. Just wait until the survivors are getting close, and when they come in for the hook rescue, summon your 4th guard and boom, they're all exposed. Under the right circumstances, you can literally win a match with one play, but it's unfortunately the only viable option with this add-on. Creeping further down, we have the very last purple add-on, Blacksmith's Hammer. Anytime a survivor escapes from a guard hunt by any means except by grabbing the standard, they suffer from the exhausted status effect and are hindered for 15 seconds. Now 15 seconds of exhaustion is pretty decent if you're going for an anti-exhaustion build, but anytime the word hindered comes up in DBD, you have to look at the actual percentages. Being hindered as a survivor basically means movement speed penalty, which is by far the more rewarding aspect of this add-on. That said, it's only a 3% hindered penalty, which is really pathetic. For context, Wesker's hindered penalty when survivors are fully infected is 8%, and Clown's bottles are 15%, so the number is just way too low to make this add-on worth it unless you just hate exhaustion. The last meme add-on is Cold Steel Manacles, which summons the jailer twice in a row. The only reason to use this add-on is to combine it with Lightweight Greaves for the 10% movement speed buff, and there's no universe where throwing the Knight's entire power away for this small bonus is worth it, unless you're just memeing. Now we're moving on to the gutter tier add-ons, which are add-ons that serve no viable purpose. Starting with the Broken Hilt, which inflicts survivors with the Mangled status effect when they are hit by a guard. The Mangled status effect makes it take 25% longer for a survivor to heal or be healed. Now, before I explain why this add-on is worthless, I'm first going to clump it together with the next gutter tier add-on, Chainmail Fragment, which inflicts survivors with the Hemorrhage status effect when they are injured by a guard. So 2 separate add-ons that together essentially inflict Sloppy Butcher on them, but only if they are injured by one of your guards. However, since you have to replace add-ons that even make it possible for your guards to hit survivors in the first place, these 2 add-ons become literally worthless. Next up is Ironworker's Tongs, which make a survivor suffer from the Oblivious status effect for 20 seconds after successfully escaping a guard hunt. So any way you look at this add-on, it's never doing anything. If you're in a chase with a survivor who manages to escape a hunt mid-chase, you're still chasing them, so this add-on doesn't do anything. And if you're not in a chase with that survivor, that means you're already chasing another survivor or purposely doing something more vital at the moment. So again, it's not doing anything really ever. Going down to the brown add-ons now, we have Pillaged Mead, which increases the speed of guards' breaking actions by 25%, so basically they kick gens faster and break pallets faster. But here's the thing, Carnifex is the only guard who breaks pallets fast enough in the first place, which is already more than fast enough. Then when it comes to gen kicking speed, you actually want your guards to kick them slowly, because the longer they're beating on the gen, the more time survivors can't get back on the gen. This is really helpful for situations where a gen is almost done and you can't quite get to the gen in time to stop it, but you can order your guard to kick it from a distance and buy you that time. If your guard kicks it instantly, the survivors will vulture back onto it and possibly finish it before you even arrive. And coming in at the very bottom, worst add-on, we have Gritty Lump, which increases the movement speed of guards while on patrol but not in a chase. The funny thing about this add-on is that it might actually even hurt you, because you usually want your summoned guards to stay close to where you summoned them, and this add-on is going to make them leave that radius much quicker. So at best, it does absolutely nothing for you, and at worst, it weakens your power. For the next part of this guide, I'm going over some really quick tips that will help you maximize the effectiveness of the Knight. Your starting guard is always the Carnifex, so if you see an annoying breakable wall spawning into the match, use your Carnifex to break that wall. This way you're setting yourself up for a quicker chase in the future, and you're priming your assassin for the first survivor you find. We touched on this earlier, but your assassin and jailer guards take 6 seconds to kick a generator, and you can use this tech to basically use them as a temporary gen block while you're walking to it. Don't forget that ordering your guard to kick a gen will knock survivors off of the gen no matter what, so you can also use this anytime survivors are trying to rush a gen in your face. Another high level tip is to keep in mind that when you attack a survivor who is getting hunted by a guard, the hunt ends immediately. So what you can do is, if you have a survivor cornered but you don't need your guard to get the hit, the best option is to set your guard up in the direction the survivor will run after being hit. This way you're getting the hit and then the survivor is immediately triggering a guard hunt. This can be a way to end chases incredibly fast. Next, constantly harass survivors with your guards. Your guards can buy you a lot of extra time in a match by just spamming them whenever you possibly can. It's perfectly okay to use your guards to chase a separate survivor from the one you're chasing. Plop them down at hooks when you leave, same for gens after you kick them, scout far away gens instead of walking to them. Not only are you annoying the survivors with this, but you'll also find hiding survivors you didn't even know were there because your guards happen to spot them. Another tip, guards hit body blockers, so if you're trying to get a specific survivor and another survivor is body blocking, just keep in mind that your guard will attack that player for you and get them out of your way.
It's seen again, now what happens? Took the hit. Oh, listen, I'm in no rush to not down you. I have no stacks. Fuck me. Okay, I guess.
Also, anytime you down a survivor, you should drop a guard on top of yourself before going for the pickup. This way you're making it much more difficult for another survivor to go for a flashlight save or a pallet save.
Alright, she's gonna go for the flashlight save anyway. Does she get it? No, she doesn't. Beautiful. She actually got down?
In addition, you can funnel survivors with guards. This works really well on Haddonfield and RPD, where survivor movement is very predictable. If a survivor gets chased into a building with only one other exit, you could just wait at the exit for a free hit. Same thing applies to two-story structures. If a survivor is upstairs and you send your guard up, they'll most likely jump out the window straight into you if you wait at the bottom. More on this point, use patrol paths to cut off choke points. A lot of maps have really narrow choke points that survivors have to pass through in order to save their teammates or do specific gens. In this example, I simply put my guards on a patrol path across RPD's choke points, and they literally all rage quit because they couldn't get to the other side of the building to unhook their teammate. So even though I wasn't actually near the hook, they still rage quit just because they couldn't get past me. When it comes to the guards AI, keep in mind that any noise notifications make guards go through walls and floors. So if a survivor is below you but they fast vault a window within your guard's patrol range, the guard will straight up go through the floor and hit them. The same goes for missed skill checks. Now this is important if you're playing against good survivors. Keep an eye out because they will try to loop back to the standard that your guard puts down before they start hunting. If the survivor picks this flag up, they get a sprint burst and an endurance shield for free. So if you see them going for it, make sure to block them and hit them before they can. Also, if for any reason you see that your guard is able to hit a healthy survivor without your help, you can walk with your guard, and if you time it precisely, you can insta down the survivor by swinging a split second after your guard does. The assassin works best for this. The last tip is very simple but incredibly important. When you get a survivor at a loop, this is when you need to be spamming out your guard as fast as possible. You want to regain control of the night as fast as you can. Ideally, this works best if it's a loop where the survivor doesn't have a line of sight on you, but even if they do, still spam it. If you spam the guard fast enough, they will be forced to leave the loop, which should hopefully let you get a quick hit. Okay, so those were tips on how to more effectively use the knight, but now let's talk about his weaknesses. The big first one is actually stealth. The knight is one of the most oppressive killers in DBD when it comes to chase. Regardless of how skilled a looper the player is or how badly designed the map is, the knight will still eventually get a survivor down. As a result of that, survivors will hide a lot so they can avoid getting chased altogether. Some of my only losses as knight recently have been just because I couldn't find survivors the entire match. Some perks to get around this are Monitor and Abuse, which gives you a smaller terror radius outside of chase so they have less time to hide when you approach, or Nowhere to Hide, which is a perk that shows you nearby survivor auras after kicking a gen, and this is one of the Knight's perks, so you will have it. His worst maps to play on are big maps that heavily reward Shift W gameplay. Leary's is an awful map for Knight because survivors just hold forward the entire game, going from window to window. Another awful map is Eyrie of the Crows because again, survivors can just hold W forever and not be punished for it. The takeaway from this is that when you get a bad map for the Knight, just keep in mind that if you want to win, you may need to play a bit aggressive straight from the start, try to find a weak link and get them out of the game, or use them as bait for better teammates. Again, this is why I use the Call to Arms add-on because it really helps you on big maps like this. Another weakness of the Knight is that he has a slow start in a match, so typically he's a comeback killer. You could try to run things like Corrupt Intervention or Lethal Pursuer, but personally I prefer to use perks that synergize with making a comeback instead. Just be aware that you will probably lose a few gens early in a match. Now we're going to move on to the best builds for the Knight, starting with a more fast-paced build. It's also my favorite because it's very chase-oriented and anti-survivor meta. The first perk is Save the Best for Last, which grants you a token up to a maximum of 8 tokens for each basic attack on a survivor that isn't the obsession, and these stacks reduce your hit cooldown, so after you hit a survivor, you'll recover faster and faster. This works great in the current meta. For one, Dead Hard actually gives you a stack, so it's not so much of a big deal. In general, there's a lot of endurance effects that you can farm stacks with. It also gives you a built-in reason to ignore one survivor on the team. That means you're going to be ignoring the obsession as much as possible. You don't have to ignore them completely, but just don't chase them. This way you'll get survivors dead much quicker without specifically tunneling anyone out of the game. The next perk is Fearmonger, which is going to be doing a lot more than you might think. Fearmonger afflicts survivors with the exhausted and blindness status effects while repairing a generator, and the effect lasts for 5 seconds after letting go of a gen. Now there's a few under the hood bonuses to using this perk. For one, it counters Fogwise completely, which is a new survivor meta perk that allows them to see the killer every time they hit a great skill check. The same also goes for other survivor aura reading perks like Empathy, Kindred, and Bond. In addition to that, survivors will not be able to see where their teammates are getting downed, which will hurt their map awareness and most importantly, allow the rest of the build to work. Our next perk is Scorch Hook Pain Resonance. This converts 4 hooks into Scorch Hooks, and when you hook a survivor on one of those hooks, it will cause the generator with the most progress to explode and lose 15% progression, as well as make any survivors repairing the generator let go and scream. Now by itself, it's not the most oppressive thing in the world. The gen progress lost isn't very significant. However, when paired with our last perk, Dead Man Switch, when the gen explodes and kicks the survivor off of it, the gen then becomes blocked for 30 seconds and highlights in a white aura for the killer as well. Now the problem with Dead Man Switch is that survivors will usually be able to see when you're about to hook their teammate and just let go of the generator at the last second, but because of Fearmonger, they're blind while on a gen, making the Pain Resonance Dead Man Switch combo actually work. Then combine this combo with Save the Best for Last and you will start snowballing survivors to the point where they cannot recover. Now since this build is my favorite and I play against a lot of very sweaty survivors and survive with friends, I run Map of the Realm and Call to Arms. Also, if you missed it, you can check out the add-ons chapter for more info on those add-ons. For his second build, we're relying less on RNG. Scorch Hook spawns are unfortunately always a coin toss in DBD. So to start, we have Barbecue and Chili. So every time you hook a survivor, you will see the aura of every other survivor further than 40 meters from you for 4 seconds. This will give you a lot of efficient information on where survivors are and more importantly what gens they're working on. Barbecue is not used nearly as often as it used to be, so survivors don't go out of their way to hide their auras behind gens as much as they used to. So after hooking a survivor, you walk to the gen being repaired and kick it to activate Call of Brine, which will make the gen regress at 200% speed and give you a noise notification if any survivor completes a skill check on it for the next minute. The next perk is Eruption, which will mark the generator, and the next time a survivor enters the dying state by any means, the gen or gens you marked will explode, losing 10% progress and making any survivors working on the gen scream. This will afflict them with the incapacitated status effect, which will make it to where they can't do anything for 25 seconds. No gen repairing or healing. The last perk is Nowhere to Hide, so after you kick a gen, you'll see exactly where survivors are hiding nearby or what direction they're running in. Basically, you're getting a lot of value from kicking a gen with this build. Now, the reason I prefer dried horse meat over call to arms on this build is because with so much information, you'll be able to start guard hunts much more reliably, and horse meat will help you get a few free guard hits. Then obviously, again, map of the realm, because there's no choice. The last build here is for players who only have vanilla perks. Now, the vanilla perks don't synergize very well together, so I came up with a build that is fun and decent, but also a little bit gimmicky. Starting with Scourge Hook Monstrous Shrine. This is going to make any survivors you hook die 20% faster once you're further than 24 meters away from the hook. Then again, we have Fearmonger, which is going to make it to where survivors working on gens will not be able to see where their teammates are hooked, so they'll have to let go of the gen to get that information. If they get too greedy, you might easily get a free Hell State or two throughout the match because of Monstrous Shrine and Fearmonger working together. Then we have Jolt, which will make every generator within 32 meters of a survivor who is downed with a basic attack explode and lose 8% progress and then start regressing. As far as vanilla perks go, Jolt is basically the only gen regression perk. Lastly, we have Hex No One Escapes Death, or NOED, because it's the best vanilla perk in the game. With little gen defense and good information, NOED is going to be somewhat essential to not have a miserable experience. For add-ons, this time we're running Map of the Realm with Grim Iron Mask, which will keep survivors blind for a lot longer in a match, again helping out with Monstrous Shrine and comboing with Fearmonger. If you're not a fan of a specific perk in this build, I understand though. The Knight has a lot of interesting perks that are completely serviceable on their own, so if you want to switch one of these perks out for one of his built-in perks, you'll definitely still get value out of it. Now, speaking of his perks, his best perk is Nowhere to Hide. I'm really loving this perk as it keeps the pacing of a match going forward and further rewards you for taking the time to kick a gen, which can often cost you a free hit. This perk is a bit bugged at the moment, but how it's supposed to work is after kicking a gen for 5 seconds, any survivors that are within 24 meters of your location will be revealed to you. His next perk is Hex Face the Darkness, which is a very unique Hex perk because it only activates while the survivor who activated it is injured or until they enter the dying state. And what it does is make survivors outside of your terror radius scream every 25 seconds, revealing their location and interrupting any action they're performing. The thing about this perk though is that it isn't good on night. It's really only good for stealth killers because of the terror radius requirement or highly mobile killers, so you can quickly get to their position when they scream. You can also get meme value on killers like Pig and Pinhead who can passively benefit from the scream interruptions with things like solving the box or when survivors are trying to get a trap off of their head. His last perk is Hubris, which exposes a survivor for 20 seconds after stunning you by any means. That includes pallets, flashlights, head-on, etc. So this perk gets hard countered once survivors know you have it, because they will start pre-dropping pallets to avoid the exposed status effect, which allows you to one-hit down them. That's why, again, if you want to run this perk, it's not good at all for Night. Night plays around pallets 90% of the time. Where this perk shines is with killers who benefit from pre-dropped pallets like Leatherface, Wraith, Blight, and Spirit, and on those killers, the perk is honestly S tier. It's so good that you don't even need to run any gen defense. Basically, all of his perks are cool and good, but Nowhere to Hide is really the only one he actually synergizes with. So there you have it. This guide should get you started with learning to play the Knight in the right way. The killer does have a learning curve, so you will need to put time in and really take risks using his power in order to become a good Knight player. I've watched a lot of gameplay of Knight, and I know that early on you can get the impression that his power is not always worth using, or that it's just terrible, but stay persistent with using the power and you will see why Knight isn't just underrated, but why he's actually one of the strongest killers in the entire game. If you'd like to watch me play the Knight, I'm live on Twitch 5 nights a week, so you could check me out there and we could do some Knight builds. That said, let me know your thoughts on the Knight, or if there's anything you feel I left out of the video so I can help you out in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching and have a good one.